Let's see, is this on? Oh, there we go. Can you hear me? All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to bring up the panel. I'm going to do things a little different than maybe panels you've seen before. I'm not going to have everyone introduce themselves. I find that takes too long. Everyone on the panel, every company they're with has a website. If you need to know about the company, go look at the website. I'm not going to have them do the 1 minute, here's what we do, okay? So, get my glasses out so I can actually read the questions. So what we're going to talk about today is payments. And I've got Eric Purdum from DXC. Thank you.
Howdy.
I've got Jagdeep Sahota.
Yep. Hey.
From Salesforce, former JPMC. Nashley.
Mascarenhas.
That would have been my third guess. Good. Brian Ma. Finnovant. I'm sorry. And Nashley is with Marqeta. Okay? So, panel, I want you to raise your hand if you have an Apple Card. Not a one. Okay.
There's the problem.
Raise your hand if you own any cryptocurrency. 3 or 4. Raise your hand if you've tried Amazon's self-checkout. Okay? And raise your hand if you've used Alexa or Siri to buy something online. Okay, good. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the innovation going on around payments. First up, great subject. You've read a lot about it. Kind of crazy. Libra. I'm going to go with you, Eric. Is it dead because Visa, MasterCard, PayPal jumped off the boat? Or is it okay because they're just big, slow, dumb payment companies anyways?
Well, since they're clients of mine, I'm not going to say anything about MasterCard and Visa. I don't think Libra's dead, right? I think there's plenty of room for innovation in the payment space. But I think what I heard earlier was that they're sucking the air out of the room right now, right? All attention is now on Facebook and cryptocurrency. So I think they're going to answer a lot of questions, but I also think they're going to expedite the conversation, right? I think you're going to have a lot more focus on it now because of the Facebook size, and I think that's going to allow us to move forward a lot of that stuff. So not dead.
Brian, what's your thoughts on Libra? What do you think? Is it going to make it? Are we going to see a real Libra eventually?
My take on this is that it really will take off given the proper amount of time. My sense now just watching and by the way, Mark Zuckerberg is speaking today in Washington, D.C. while we're meeting here. So this is a really big deal, and it's something that I think they're really working actively to try to promote. They've got a great idea. It's a great concept. At the outset, it's taken a lot of heat because of the fact that there's still a lot of open questions. People are trying to figure out how it's going to work and what it's going to do, how it's going to impact society in different countries outside of the U.S. But at a minimum, I would think that they could implement it even with a friends and family launch in the beginning. Even if they did not do it globally, I think they can start maybe in that area and then build from there and then get it to launch globally.
Okay, fair enough. Nashley, do you trust Facebook enough to let them handle your currency and your family updates?
I think I don't want to comment completely on that. But on a personal level, I think the answer is no, right? Especially on I think on the currency front, I think they get it, right? And I think the countries in general get it. I've heard the latest development is they're thinking of pegging it to a currency. And I think that is probably the stance that makes a lot of sense, right? That's where I think regulators, the government as a whole will probably be more open to that idea, right? And I think that's an idea that can be, even the public would be open to that.
That's fair. Jagdeep, do you think, as a former JPMC, do you think that banks are going to let go of currency or central governments are going to let go of currency enough that Libra could succeed?
I don't know if they'll let go of currency, but they'll certainly participate in the currency. So I think the future is that Libra will come in alignment with FinCEN and other regulatory requirements, and then government could participate in it.
Okay, great. Okay, that's Libra. Moving on to faster payments. Faster payments, for those of you who don't know, in the US was started by a committee in 2015. Their goal was to have ideas by 2020. Okay, that gives you an idea of faster payments in the US. In the UK, faster payments got launched, is now being used. So how about for Brian? Why do faster payments move so slow in the U.S.? What's wrong with us?
Well, I think the U.S. market is, it's the same question. Why do we still have cards with swipe, magnetic swipes on the back of them? Once we seem to glom onto something here, we hold on to it for a very long time. It's difficult to take it out of our environment. I was at Visa and MasterCard both over the years, and there was always predictions that the physical plastic would disappear, and then the chip came along, right? And so now we have the chip on the card. So that's actually older technology. And if you look at what the fraudsters are saying, they're 5 years away from hacking the chips. So as we move into the future, what technology is next? Well, if we look at other countries, they've all gone to mobile devices to buy things because the physical plastic is becoming obsolete, and they don't have the infrastructure like we do with the phone lines. So mobile devices are now kind of taking over. But in the U.S., because we've done it for so long, it's hard to get rid of it.
Yeah, behavior changes slowly. Jagdeep, if I think about same-day ACH versus real-time payments, what would you say to a corporate client or somebody in the corporate world? Does it matter, same-day ACH, or do I need real-time payments?
So funny enough, my JPMC career, we were thinking of both, right? So we have APIs for RTP, and we have APIs for same-day ACH as well. The difference is the use case, where do you need it, right? Because there's a cost to doing business on both of those rails. So if you're doing it where, let's say there's an insurance use case, you need to pay someone out, it's ideal that you do it in RTP. But if you're setting up your invoices and you can set it up that, hey, I can do it same day, extend my cash I have on hand, same day works, and it's not at the same cost as doing RTP. So different scenarios, but yeah.
So use case specific.
Right.
I buy that. It's a good answer. Eric, so if I think about real-time payments, is fraud more likely or less likely in real-time payments?
Oh, fraud is here to stay for all payments. Let's be honest, right?
That's realistic.
Yeah, but I think, to the point you made about chips, they're going to keep up with us, right? So it's our job to keep ahead of them, right? And it doesn't matter the rail, right? It matters the instrument that you're using and the fraud of which they will participate in. So we just have to keep one step ahead, which is hard for any rail we do. The difference with the real time is the money's gone right away. So the need to have tools that are more real time based, like some of the stuff we've seen today with some of the fintechs, is going to be a necessity going forward. It's going to be a cost of doing business. We have to.
That's fair. I've often said that if you don't think there's any innovation in financial services, look at fraudsters. They're geniuses. They are always one step ahead. Sadly, that's lifetime employment for us, I suppose. So, Nashley, APIs. Any concern about security? If I suddenly put keys to the vault out in the open, am I risking everything? Are APIs more dangerous than not?
Everything that we've seen suggests that APIs are no more dangerous than everything else, right? It goes back to what Eric said, right? Which is, look, fraudsters are people are always getting one step ahead, but then it's on the people who are sort of managing the infrastructure to sort of keep that security going. So nothing suggests that it's worse. I feel like if anything, just given the way the structure is and the security behind it, I feel pretty confident about what we have.
Excellent. Jagdeep, Jeff Bezos is famous for saying, your margin is my opportunity. Payments has thin margins already. Is Amazon going to become one of the largest payment companies in the world?
It just depends how you're looking at it. In terms of if you look at dollar moved, Amazon is the largest merchant on the internet already. So they are part of the payment ecosystem, right? That's where the origination happens for transactions. Now, what he can do is lower his cost of accepting payments, which he's done in multiple ways, including his own card and cash and other things. So I don't think Amazon will be. Amazon already is the largest merchant on the internet that moves money.
So are they in there just to squeeze out, as I call it, the 2.5% tax? Just that goes right to their bottom line? Is that the strategy?
Well, it's also access, right? So he wants to get to customers who don't have cards, who are in other environments. So he needs to be innovative with payments and think around cash in, cash out, and how they buy with it.
Okay, good. Nashley, digital wallets. Who wins? Big tech, Apple, Visa, MasterCard, maybe a mobile carrier, somebody else? Who wins digital wallets?
I think it's also a question of where, right? I think if you look at in some countries, it almost feels like almost a regional play in some ways, right? So in China, you clearly have, Tencent, Alipay. In India, you have their own set of providers. In the US, frankly, you just haven't seen the traction, right? I think if anything, it looks like some of what like Apple is doing with the card. Ultimately, I mean, I think where the panel is going and where probably, you're seeing payments going is like, how do you remove friction, right? And so the question is like, is a digital wallet going to remove friction any more than any other form of payment, right? To your question on Amazon, what they're trying to do is not just the 2.5%, but also remove friction, right? Like now I'm going to the grocery store, I need to stand in the checkout line. How much easier is Amazon Go, right? So I think that's probably where the question is.
Excellent. I recently did the Amazon store in San Francisco. If you haven't, highly recommend it. It's so much easier than you think it is. However, a friend of mine, Gela Boscovich, recently said, I don't want zero friction. I don't want to accidentally buy a new car online because I pushed a button, right? Really good point, and something we have to think about in the payments business. Some friction is okay. Eric, question for you. Square's IPO, a lot of people don't know this, was a down round, meaning the previous valuation was higher than the actual IPO. Now I look at Stripe, $35 billion valuation most recently. If I look at Visa's PE ratio of about 35, that means Stripe needs to earn profit $1 billion a year. Are they overvalued?
Yes.
Love it.
Yes.
Man, a few words.
But I also think there's so many choices these days. My wife owns a small business. She takes credit cards. We are fighting for pennies at this point, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go with the best percentage she gets for every credit card she swipes. And I'm actually not interested in what the brand is anymore. I'm interested in making the most amount on that transaction swipe. The company that gives it to me, that'll be the company that wins.
Excellent. Well said. I was First Date Adventures a few years back, and I remember we used to joke, our margins are such that we have to get metal shears and cut pennies into sections to determine how much we're making on any given transaction. So I 100% agree with that. Let's talk about cross-border payments. Let's go to Brian. ISO 20022. Is that a standard that's going to take off? Is it going to make a big difference? I've heard standards for years. Sometimes they have impact, sometimes they don't. What do you think?
With all the standards, it takes time. So, there's a process where you have to kind of burn them in, come up with your POCs and then work through that, implement them and get them out in the market. A lot of these types of things will take mandates before they kick in. So once the mandates hit and those get cycled out, then people have to go through certification and you have to test and validate before you turn these types of things on, because the last thing you want to have happen is push a transaction through and have it fail and become an issue for your organization or for the customer that you're trying to transfer the payment for. But these things do take time.
Nashley, have you looked much at Europe regulatory pushes, GDPR, all this other stuff? The U.S. doesn't do that in the same way as Europe does. Is that an advantage for Europe? Do they have better, faster payments because regulators push everyone towards a certain standard in a certain way?
Short answer, I'd say yes, right? With some caveats, right? I think, look, having some of these standards helps, to your point, with ISO 2022, now you have that, but now, what's Fed now going to do? Are they going to be in the same standard? There's no global standard, right? So you don't have, I think to the extent that you can have, global standards, makes things a lot easier. There's more ubiquity and there's more movement to certain types, right? So that's one. I think the second thing is when you look at what they're doing with open banking, I think there's some advantages that they have, right? People are looking at modular solutions, they're looking at best-in-class solutions. To me, I think the US will just get to that naturally, right? So I think there's ways we'll get there.
Excellent. Jagdeep, billions of dollars VC money invested in P2P cross-border companies like TransferWise and more than I can list. But Western Union still has most of the market share. Are the billions invested in that valid? Is that where VC money should be going? Is P2P cross-border changing?
So I don't think, I mean, yeah, obviously it's changing, right? It's changing for the customer segment or the persona that has a device and understands those technologies. But when you look at that mom that's looking for money at the corner bodega, or the guy who works his day shift and goes to the bodega and sends money, that segment is not changing. So if by corridor, we'll see things moving to, electronic. So India may be a corridor, US to India would be a corridor that would move faster. US to LAC may not be that fast.
Fair. Eric, switching. AI, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, and there's a lot of ways to slice it. What's going to be the biggest impact in payments of AI, machine learning actually taking off?
So two thoughts on that. One is that there's no bank out there today, in my humble opinion, that's going to trust AI to make a payment decision, right? Not for a long time. We're going to have to see, that's going to be a long road. But number one in my mind, and it's a number one with a not even a close number two, fraud. We have got to get better at fraud. And I don't mean just regional fraud. And I love the way like TCH has done some of their stuff where they've got a mother system of fraud and it talks to each baby system at the banks. So now we're starting to look at trends that are regional based versus just bank based. And we've got to get there, and AI will help us.
Excellent. Going over to you, Brian. Payments. Is it a service, a product, or a platform? And I think of this because I was listening to a podcast this morning, and they actually debated it, and I thought, gosh, banks think of it as a product. Valley people think of it as a service. Which is it? And does it matter?
It's a little bit of both. Yeah, it depends on who you are and how you look at it. From a standpoint of having been at Visa and MasterCard and at several startups now, we've looked at it both ways over the course of those years as well. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and the market you're going after, your customer base, and ultimately, how you want to deploy it in the market.
Yeah, fair. Nashley, blockchain. Okay, it's coming, I think, maybe. What's the best use case for blockchain? How would you, if you were in charge of blockchain at Marqeta, how would you roll out blockchain? What would you make the use case?
Someone was once joking that blockchain is going to find new ways for people to lose money, right?
Fair.
Because not just in the crypto world, but also like you could think. I mean, look, if you look at one interesting use case is how do you securitize some assets that could never have been securitized before? Like art could be a good example, right? So again, a lot of advantages of that, a lot of new ways of people losing money, right? I think as a form of payment, like for us, where we're seeing this is, look, there's a small chance, but a real chance that blockchain and crypto could be a real thing, right? And if it becomes a form of payment, whatever, store of value, that's, I think, where we see an application. And if it becomes real, we want to be a part of it. Still, I think the jury is a bit out there.
That's fair. Jagdeep, Apple Card. I noticed you don't have one. I actually do, and I love it. Is it a game changer or a nothing burger? And it's really about the UX and the experience. We can all admit the economics behind it and the rails hadn't changed. But does it matter in the payments world?
I think it matters in the payment world that it's more contextual, right? It's changing the user experience. It's got cool features that were not before. So, right, we all have a plastic in our pocket. That plastic doesn't talk back to us today. What Apple Card and Marqeta with APIs are able to do is every transaction, you can turn that plastic on, you can turn that plastic off. And that's putting control and letting that card talk back to you in ways that it has never talked back. So I think Apple's leading in the user experience and the coolness factor. From a payments geek perspective, I don't even like the reward structure. I mean, it rips up when I put it in my jeans. I don't want that card.
Fair enough. Eric, you were shaking your head vigorously. I'm going to let you address the same question.
Yeah, I think it's a nothing burger. Sorry. I may be.
That's fine.
But I think part of the problem is the market is so saturated with all these different methods right now, right? So Apple's gone after their client base, which is notoriously very dedicated to Apple. I get it, right? Heck, if I owned that market share, I'd go after them too. It's a good business model. But I'm an Android guy, so I will never use an Apple card, right? My wife's an Apple person. She won't use it either. She just won't.
Okay, fair enough. By the way, I'm a member of the Apple cult, bought their stock. I own every product. I've always said if they come out with a car, I'll be the first in line to buy it. I just love the UX, all about the UX. With that, if I came into some money recently, Brian, and I gave it to you, $1 million, you can invest in any fintech. Where would you put that money?
Better say your own.
Don't you dare.
Other than what?
You may want to answer your own.
Oh yeah, Finnovant. That's
No. Anyone but you.
That's a really good question. So any company anywhere.
Any fintech, non-public, that you're aware of, fundraising, not, already has a bunch of money, doesn't, who would you invest in?
Boy, that's a great question. You know, there's actually so many companies. I would say I would go after a company that's focused on disrupting the point of sale, because this to me has also been a big focus in my career, is finding a way to make that experience at the point of sale when you're in a checkout line, you're trying to go through a store and purchase something, kind of like what Amazon's doing, but make that so easy and so simple that the customer experience is just the greatest that it could be. So that's where my focus would be, is finding a company right in that space. And I think the answer is mobile. I think that's really where the answer goes to.
So, Nashley, to that point, Amazon introduced this amazing checkout experience. I was blown away how easy and great it was. Why couldn't any merchant do that? Why didn't someone else do that? Why did it take someone who's great at online to figure out bricks and mortar?
I mean, it feels like, you know, it's almost asking, like, why can't, you know, why aren't banks, you know, at the cutting edge? Why aren't,
It's okay to say they're big, slow, and dumb. None
exactly.
of them are here. Go
But
ahead.
I think, like, in general, I feel like, you know, when you're in this space, I think it's this classic, you know, innovator's dilemma that they have, right? And I think that's really it. I think when Amazon came in, they realized they're looking from the outside and they're saying, like, look, what are the pain points? We have to come in, right? We can't just come in with another store. Like, what are the pain points? Let's try to fix it, right? So I think that's really the simple reason why they see probably things maybe that others don't. That and probably the advantage that they have from the tech side, right?
Great. Eric.
Let me make a point. Amazon is a great data company, right? They do data better than anybody else I know. And I'll give you a great example. I have a 3-year-old, and when he was born, I went from, you know, buying comic books and video games to diapers and wipes, right? And 30 seconds after I made my first purchase, Amazon sent me a subscribe and save email. Sign up, get diapers delivered to your door every 30 days, and I'll give you a 20% discount. Couldn't wait, right? It was the best thing ever. They slice and dice data better than everybody else. They know more than anybody else does about us. I'm telling you, they do.
Agreed, but they often miss context. As an example, my kids were online, and they knew what they were going to have for Christmas a month before because I bought it on Amazon.
Fair.
So there are weaknesses in their strategy, but I agree. They're an amazing data play. Jagdeep, I found another $1 million in my bank account. Good news. I want you to invest it in a fintech for me.
You know, I'm a platform guy. I would go with a Stripe or a Marqeta because they're enabling multiple ISVs and they're enabling multiple use cases, and they're not taking on the risk. So these are the new issuer processors out there, and I think that's probably a better play.
Excellent answer. I normally dog panelists who name their own company. Jagdeep has now twice mentioned Marqeta, not his, so I can't really have an issue.
Thank you, Jagdeep.
Fair play. Let's talk about mobile for a minute. Eric, mobile in China is ginormous. Is it just because the government mandates, or did they just leapfrog because they didn't have a lot of credit cards?
So I was actually in China last year for 2.5 weeks, and I was amazed, just amazed at the amount of mobile people carrying around mobile phones. Right, I think it's actually a higher concentration than what we have here, and I mean small children carrying it around.
Have you met my teenagers?
Yeah, I have
never
teenagers
without
too, and and it, you know, it doesn't leave her arm. But so I think there's, you know, my interpretation of that is that there is with China, there's a little bit of a forced reckoning going on. They're pushing down policy versus the U.S. that pulls it up a little bit more, right? And I think that has a play in this because I think they're forcing behaviors that technically we can't do here.
Yeah. So leading that, let's go to Brian.
Yeah.
Biggest payment company in the world in 2025. Who is it?
2025. Ooh, boy, that's a good one. I would say it's probably going to fall on the backs of like an Amazon, who will probably get there. Just because I know
bigger
people,
than Visa, MasterCard.
Yeah,
the
just 'cause
biggest payments company in the world. Wow.
Yeah. I think they have the ability to reach that much, and you know, to take payments for just about anything, whether it's through retail, whether it's through online, and open that up. Now, you could argue, could Facebook, make a leapfrog there with their cryptocurrency? I mean, that's a big debate point at the moment. But that seems to be on a slower boat. So maybe Amazon.
That's fair. Jagdeep, I'll ask you the same question. Biggest payment company in 2025. Who are we looking at?
Probably Alipay or China Union. They're already bigger in terms of volume today.
Yeah.
I mean, they do more than Amazon does on red envelopes, so I think there's a much better opportunity in those areas.
Nashley, IoT payments. There are thousands of devices online, soon to be millions, that are going to need to be authenticated, identified, and maybe make a payment. How does an autonomous car pay for gas? Right? How does a fleet pay for gas? What do you think? What is an IoT system going to look like? Is it going to be our current rails? Is it going to be MasterCard, Visa just connecting IoT devices? Or does somebody else step into that?
I think it's current rails, right? It's incredibly difficult to sort of build a new set of rails. So I just presume it's going to be either the Visa, MasterCard sort of, I won't be surprised it's one of them sort of winning and finding a solution out there.
Okay. Eric, biggest payment company in 2025. I'm curious who you think.
I'm going to go traditional. I think some of the movement we're seeing, like with Visa, doing some of the new rails they're doing, and MasterCard buying the companies they're buying, I think there's been a realization certainly with those big two, that they've got to reach beyond the credit card space. They've got to get out of the ISO 8583 into the 20022 space and start to think about non-card payments. If they continue to be successful, they will continue to dominate, I think.
Excellent. Jagdeep, we were talking outside, and you like Salesforce, great culture, very ethical, love it. Have you guys talked about AI ethics at Salesforce?
This is my answer, not the company's answer. Yes, we've talked about it. We've talked about it, and I think I look for partnerships for industries, right? So there's a huge opportunity for AI in the industry segment. Ethics is an overall discussion. I mean, it was interesting to see someone present a startup that's looking at models and how do you regulate those models and what they're doing. That's very much needed in machine learning, because just by itself, AI could start, declining loans from a certain segment just because of certain rates that they have. So that turns out to be racially or zip code biased as well. So when these things are self-learning, we need a regulation on top of it. So something that Einstein team works quite a bit on.
Excellent. Nashley, FinTech legacy, connections, partnerships, whatever. What's the best one you've seen? Not naming your own company on your T-shirt.
Best fintech?
Best FinTech, big company, legacy player partnership. Who's really figured out how to do that well?
I think PayPal, right? PayPal's one of those like dark horses. Like when we were talking about the biggest companies, and in 2025, I feel like PayPal's made a lot of good acquisitions. They've a ton of partnerships. So they do a lot of things right. So they're almost in this dark horse in this race, right? They're already at $100 billion. So what's to say that they can be the largest company, right?
Excellent. Eric, consolidation. I can't even list them all. My old pals at First Data got acquired, Global World, like everybody. What's the next big super merger, do you think, in payments?
Visa and MasterCard.
You heard it here first.
Never happened.
Submit, you heard that, right?
Do not go call your brokers. Okay?
Yeah, no.
That would be insider trading, I'm sure.
I think what we're seeing, too, is a lot of the big companies out there that have firm and solid banking relationships are really starting to consolidate a lot. So the FDR, right? Pfizer buys FDR, FIS buys World Bank. I mean, it just goes on and on, right? So what we're seeing is some of these heavy players out there that have huge relationships with banks starting to consolidate a lot of those payment activities. But I still think we're going to see the fintech play because it's needed, right? Because those big companies, I would argue, probably they call themselves fintech. It's very hard still to move into
they're
those
not
organizations.
fintech.
Exactly.
That's a different. Brian, we got 46 seconds. Last question. Given this consolidation, all they talk about is synergy and scale and this and that. Do these consolidations actually deliver more value to merchants or the ecosystem or to customers?
I think in some cases they do. And if we look at the acquiring community and how big that is, and think about integrating and innovating around the point of sale, if that can be done properly, and we see some disruption there and some high-level mergers and acquisitions and a greater sense of innovation, I think that will really open up. I think a lot of innovators, small companies, startups, can help build that and bridge that. And as we go forward in time, I think we'll see a lot of improvements, both in the security. We talk about fraud. We talk about security, and the ability to purchase frictionlessly, right? So you can come in, you can make a purchase without any customer issues through the point of sale. These are areas I think you'll see a lot of change over time.
Okay, great. That's our time. Thank you, everyone. Please give the panel a big hand. They didn't get these questions in advance. Thank you for the great answers. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you, Dion. That was very engaging.